Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we have to talk about EVs and whether they are actually the future because, well, I've had a chance to live with several EVs this year, and I have a lot of positives to say about them, but then a lot of concerns as well, and so I just want to go over everything in today's video. But with that being said, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And if you want to see more content just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post videos every single day. Let's get into it. First off, I need to briefly describe my experience with EVs over the last year. So automakers have decided that they are going all in on EVs. And so a lot of the press cars I've been getting this year have been fully electric. And so I've had the chance to live with several EVs this year. And then on top of that, because these automakers are releasing so many EVs, with the review side of things on my channel, I've reviewed a bunch of EVs. Now, reviewing an EV isn't nearly as good as living with an EV, so I'm super grateful that I've had the opportunity to live with a bunch of these EVs, but it's definitely changed my mind on a lot of different aspects of the EV world. First off, living with EVs has actually given me a lot more respect for Tesla. Now, I will never consider myself a Tesla fanboy because, well, I have a lot of gripes with the product itself, but they do a lot of things right. First off, range. Most Teslas have at least 300 plus miles of range, and some of them have like 400 miles of range. And that is great with an electric car. And now I know how great it is because I've lived with a bunch of electric cars that have only like 200 miles of range. And I can tell you it does not work. I regularly commute over 100 miles per day. And commuting over 100 miles per day when you have an EV that only has 200 miles of range is super anxiety provoking, and it's just not a fun situation whatsoever. And so obviously I've had to use the charging network quite a bit, and the charging network is an absolute disaster. And again, this is where Tesla looks like an absolute rock star because Tesla's charging network is pretty dang reliable and there's a lot of it to be had, whereas the charging network for everyone else is extremely unreliable. And again, I've experienced that firsthand. Like the EV that I had this week, the Audi e-tron GT, was an absolute nightmare, not because the car was bad, but because I could not charge the car. Every single time I went to a charging station, it either didn't work, or if it did work, I only got like a couple percent of charge, so I completely wasted my time, and it was just like a miserable situation. The only charger that I had that actually worked was at a dealership, and so it wasn't really like, I mean, it's technically a public charger, but it's not one that people are gonna like actively go to on a regular basis. And so again, it shows that Tesla's a rock star, but this also shows that like this is something that needs to be fixed. Like it's very, very bad, and experiencing it firsthand just showed me how bad our charging infrastructure is. At this point, some of you might say, well, Ben, just upgrade the outlets at your house to 240s and then you can just charge the vehicle at home and you won't have to worry about the charging infrastructure. And you're completely correct with that. And I'm actually going to be upgrading the outlets at my house to 240s so that I don't have to deal with the charging network. However, I'm in a position that a lot of people aren't, and that position is owning a home. There's a lot of people that are either renting or they live in an apartment complex or, you know, some sort of housing where they don't own it. So they can't make changes to said housing. So they have to deal with whatever outlets are at that type of housing, i.e. they're probably gonna have to use regular 110s. And so I wanted to live with that and see what it's like. And it's absolutely miserable because you basically charge a car for 24 hours and you maybe get like 40 miles of range added to it. And so again, with me commuting as much as I commute, it doesn't make any sort of logical sense. And so there's obviously going to have to be a lot of infrastructure on that side of things too, associated with housing, so that people have the proper charging in place where they live so that they can, you know, adequately charge electric vehicles. And again, for homeowners, it's really easy because you can just pay to upgrade your outlets. But for a large majority of people that don't own their home, it's going to be a lot more of a complicated situation. Now, another positive with EVs that I experienced is the fact that they drive really well. Having that instant acceleration is great when you're on the interstate and you have to pass someone that's just doing stupid stuff, or maybe you just want to pass them because you're in a hurry. It doesn't matter. You can just always do it because the acceleration is fantastic. And being at higher elevation, usually I experience power loss with vehicles, but with EVs, you don't experience that power loss. So that's something that I've thought has been pretty cool. However, something that's not so cool with EVs is the battery loss that you get because of temperature swings. If it's either too hot or too cold and the battery is just not happy, and so you basically lose a ton of life. Now, you can get cars equipped with battery heaters so you don't get a ton of loss in the cold, but there's a lot of EVs that are being released in the market that don't have these battery heaters, and so you lose a ton of your range in the cold. Again, I've had EVs that are supposed to get 240, 250 miles of range on a charge, and I'm getting close to like 190 miles because of the cold. And so that's another thing that just needs to be universal, where they make it so that batteries can reliably get the amount of range that they're supposed to get no matter what's happening in the outside environment. Because, well, frankly, with a gas-powered car, that is pretty much what happens. Yeah, there are, some swings with fuel economy between really hot and really cold temperatures, but it's not nearly as much as what you experience with an electric vehicle. Another big problem with EVs is that they're simply just not affordable for the average person. Most EVs are made for luxury customers, and everyone's talking about how they're going to build a more affordable EV, but nobody's actually doing it. Nobody's going through with this. All of these new EVs that are coming out are all really expensive, especially when you compare it to the gas counterpart that vehicle is supposed to be built off of if it comes from a legacy automaker. A really good example is I recently reviewed the new Kia Niro. I reviewed the regular hybrid version, the plug-in hybrid, and the EV. The regular hybrid is like a $30,000 car. The plug-in hybrid is like a sub $40,000 car, but getting closer to $40,000. And then the EV is almost $50,000. Like, there's a huge price swing. Again, same exact vehicle, just different ways of powering it. And so until affordability gets better, then that's something that is really pushing EVs back. And I don't think there's really a lot of incentive for companies to build affordable EVs, because the resources associated with building these batteries and other components associated with EVs are really hard to get, and they're really expensive. And so the only way to be profitable with these EVs is to do what Tesla does and only build expensive, unaffordable EVs. Yes, stuff like the Model 3 and the Model Y are slightly more affordable, but those are still considered luxury cars. Tesla still doesn't build, a $20,000 or $30,000 EV. Like, they've said that they're going to do that for years, but they've never actually done it, and nobody else is going to do it until the economics make sense. And I don't know if they'll ever make sense with how hard it is to get materials for the batteries for EVs. And I really want to emphasize that last point, because if you just look at the economics behind it, it doesn't really make sense for any of the EV automakers to put these big expensive battery packs in less expensive vehicles. And this is something that's interesting about EVs, because with internal combustion engine cars, you can basically bring down the cost of a car by building out a less expensive powertrain for the car, i.e. a smaller engine that's less complex, right? And then if you want to build a more expensive car, well, you've got to throw in a more complex, more expensive engine. Whereas with these EVs, most of them use battery packs that are between 90 kilowatt hours and 110 kilowatt hours. Yeah, there are some exceptions to that, but that's the general rule. And so if the thing that is powering the EVs is all the same across the board, then, well, it makes sense for these automakers to only put these battery packs in expensive vehicles where they have more profit. Because why would you go and build out, a 90 kilowatt hour battery pack and put it in a $30,000 car when you can put that same exact battery pack in a $130,000 car? Now, I understand there are differences with the motors on the cars, because a lot of these lower cost EVs will only have, a single electric motor versus, a dual electric motor system, and so on and so forth. But the big expense with the EVs is the battery packs. It's not the motors. So economics is showing us that EVs are going to continue to be expensive until the cost of those battery packs can somehow come down. Now, another quick positive thing that I've experienced while living with EVs is just the lower energy costs associated with them. It's a lot less expensive to charge an EV than it is to fill up a car with gas. Even if you have to pay for charging, it's typically less expensive on average. So that's been fun. Let's discuss a couple more things and then just cap off today's video. So first off, the whole issue of ethically sourced materials for batteries needs to be solved, because it's an ugly situation. Everyone knows about it, and yeah, that needs to be solved. And speaking of batteries, battery reliability also needs to be solved, because in the short term, EVs are actually really reliable and they're really cheap to maintain, because less moving parts than an internal combustion engine car. But over the long term, every single EV has its battery fail. Like, that's just what happens with EVs. And it's not necessarily with high mileage, it's just with age. Batteries degrade over time. And so we need a system in play to be able to recycle these batteries, to build more batteries, so that we're not just filling up landfills with toxic battery materials, But then on top of that, we need to have production that is able to keep up with demand for batteries, not only with new cars, but with used cars. Because again, if we're going to go fully electric, then we have to have enough batteries to be able to keep up with demand on both the new car market and the used car market. And this is going to be a really big hurdle to overcome. And frankly, I don't know how it's going to be overcome. But to sum things up with today's video and kind of bring everything together, I've definitely changed my mind on EVs quite a bit over the last year, now that I've had the chance to live with a few. And here's the deal. I love some of the styling coming out on some of the new EVs, like the Audi e-tron GT, for example. I love the driving experience. They're super comfortable. They're super fast. Like, EVs are amazing when it comes to at least daily driving, right? When it comes to sports car driving, there's still a lot that needs to be improved, that's for sure. And you know, if you have access to reliable charging, then the experience of owning an EV is great, because you don't have to deal with going to a gas station, and you basically just plug and unplug every single time you get home. And I mean, that is fantastic. That being said, though, at this point, EVs are just for wealthy people. We are not in a situation where, you know, a large portion of the country can afford to buy these EVs, let alone charge them reliably on a regular basis, and, you know, just be able to take full advantage of transferring over to the EV life. And so until the whole affordability aspect is solved with EVs, and the charging aspect as well, then we're going to be in this weird situation where EVs are basically just, you know, special fancy cars built for rich people, and regular people will still continue to drive gas-powered cars. Let me know what you guys think about this whole EV topic. If you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe, because I post this content every single day. I'll see ya.